As of 24 hours ago, our new cohort of alumni, I was about to say we have 217 alumni of this program since its inception in 1983, but now I have to cross that out and say 223 alumni, so well done to the Spotties. Yeah. My name is Sean. I'm a graduate of the AG cohort of the FNEP program, Ecological Planner. I was with the Goshawk cohort, and now I am honored to be able to represent the Field Naturalist and Ecological Planning Program Alumni Association and get to hang out with other members of this alumni network and students, both personally and professionally, all the time. And so it's truly an honor to see you all here in the flesh, as well as like in different versions of spreadsheets and Google Forms and things like that throughout the whole year. So I just have a couple of fun things I wanted to share and kind of things to kind of set the stage for this evening, and then I'm going to turn things over to Walter for some further remarks. As I was looking through all those Google Forms and spreadsheets and whatnot, I was pulling up some interesting things that we've learned from about our community. And so I'll just do some by the numbers here to give you a sense of who we are and also just the impact that we've had both on one another as well as the greater conservation world. So I said we have 223 alumni, and they are representing, they're working in 32 different states around the country. We have saved species from the brink of extinction. There are species that would be extinct without some of us. We have taught and mentored thousands of students, K through adults, in all sorts of different ways, teaching and mentoring. We have been responsible for the protection of millions of acres of lands through purchases and protections and easements and whatnot throughout the whole country and actually throughout the whole world. We have, as FNs, raised tens of millions of dollars for conservation. And then I started turning to iNaturalist to see what else we have done since I like spending a lot of time on iNaturalist.org, as do a lot of field naturalists. And between us, we have submitted 86,000 observations of over 8,200 species, which I thought was tickled to learn that. Of our alumni, 90% of us are working in these fields of natural resource conservation, environmental education, science communication, and the great world of the diverse world of things that we are all up to, which is really exciting. And 50% of our alumni are in leadership roles of one way or another, either in a major supervisory role or directors of the organization. So pretty cool. But I think that the most notable statistic that I found in looking at all this is that more than 50% of our alumni are still involved with this program or with the Alumni Association in one way, shape, or form, either through working directly with current students out in the field, sponsoring master's projects, acting as mentors, giving to the Alumni Association, attending conferences and like festivities like this weekend. And I don't know if there's another program in the country that has such a high level of continued engagement of its alumni network, which just speaks volumes to how much we care for one another, how much we value this community, and how much that community, how important that community is when it comes to being able to do effective conservation out in the field. So when folks signed up for our weekend festivities here, we threw in a question that I wanted to be able to kind of parrot back the answers to at this particular moment. And so I asked folks in the registration, what's an example of something that's happened to you personally or professionally that couldn't have happened without your field naturalist training. And so I'm just going to read the first 5 responses to this. I think this does a really great job of demonstrating just how diverse this program is in all sorts of ways. So in just our first 5 responses, we have somebody who started a state master naturalist program to teach community members all around the state how to care for their land and interpret the natural resources around them and to be able to advocate for those. We had somebody who was able to create a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. Somebody who recently just landed a $1.3 million grant for wetland restoration. somebody who was involved in developing one of the very first carbon offset programs in the Northeast, and somebody who was just interviewed on the top science podcast in the country about their comics and science communication work. And maybe last but certainly not least is several folks wrote they met the love of their life in this program, which is just lovely. But one person, as you know, alumni know, this is a very difficult program. This is a very difficult program to encapsulate in one phrase or like one statement, right? We are professional generalists, right? Our specialty is in being general. But this quote here from one alumni describing the program, I think, is the perfect way of encapsulating this. And she says that the FN program is a nurse log for cohorts of boots on the ground, complex problem solving, whole ecosystem, conservation practitioners who can get into the field, get things done, do it in adverse conditions, and bring their findings back and communicate that to any audience. And she said that this program is unique and this program must continue. So here. And thank you all for being here this evening. And again, it's an honor to be with you all and to represent the Alumni Association. So thanks, and I'll turn it over to Walter.
Thank you, Shelburne. Thanks for being here, everybody. My name is Walter Pullman. I think I know most everybody, and I'm just so pleased to see each and every one of you joining us this afternoon. And all these phrases are coming into my head. Nurse log for conservation. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a keeper. And last night somebody last night had this scientist with charisma, which I kind of like a lot. Those are both keepers. I want to say, before I say anything else, when Sean mentioned this idea of the Alumni Association, 50% involvement, and beyond, that is enormous to a program. Incredible. Our richest resource is really our Alumni Association, and it drives so many amazing things for our present day students. I mean, I look at Dave over here, just connecting with Carolyn and working with a sponsored master's research project. This really kind of drives our program, perpetuates it forward with cutting edge science and conservation techniques. It's just an amazing thing. So thank you to all the alums. Those are here tonight. It really means an enormous amount to us. We're celebrating a lot. And I want to say, first of all, happy Mother's Day to everybody out there. I was out paddling on the Lower Platte, actually FaceTiming my mom. And there was 91 in Pittsburgh, which was really cool. So anyway, thank you, everybody. I know you have full plates of mom-related activities probably in your lives, so much appreciated. A lot to celebrate, and it's really just exciting to be right here at Shelburne Farms in the Coach Barn. As you know, as a program, like I said, alumni are a hugely rich resource. Our conservation and education partners are huge, and there's no bigger one than Shelburne Farms. I'm really pleased that Megan Camp and Alec Weber here hosting us as they do right from the beginning of the program. As Haley and others remember, we begin welcoming our cohorts of students just about 100 yards that way in the middle of the ball field, camping out in any weather to really launch a 2-year voyage in integrated field science, conservation, you name it. It all kind of comes together, and then 2 years later, they host us, as Sean mentioned, for graduation. In this room last night, 80 people gathered, celebrating the graduation of our 6 most recent alum. Dave is representing the team here today. Just an awesome team. The 39th team graduated. The program began back in 1983 with the vision of Hub Vogelman, kind of pulling together this unique graduate program that brought together this idea you were calling professional generalists. I love that sort of concept. Specializing in integration across disciplines, really, really key. And combining it, as we heard from Josh Brown last night so eloquently, about, you know, the importance of being able to communicate in compelling ways. I was really moved by his talk and his new natural community type. Those are here who know what I'm talking about. Really amazing. So lots of celebrations happening. And in the big picture, if you stand up and scale, we're also celebrating our 40th anniversary of the program with the graduation of the 39th team. Our 40th team just became second-year students at about 8 o'clock last night, and now they're doing that. And we're about to welcome the next team in. I'm really excited. Sonia and I have been keeping a little bit under wraps, but we're about to reveal we've got 6 amazing students coming in who are trusting the next 2 years of their lives with us here at the Field Naturalist program. And so they'll be here on August 10th, right out the ball field where we begin. So it's a lot to celebrate, and we're really taking the opportunity to celebrate our 40th anniversary. In fact, thanks to our partners at the UVM Foundation, key partner, the FNEP Alumni Association, and the program itself, we're rooted in the plant biology department in the College of Ag and Life Sciences. We collectively decided this was just a great opportunity to really think about how are we going to stay in the future of the program. And we're hoping everybody will leave with one of these tonight. They're hot off the press, and it's called The Next 40 Years of the Field Naturalist Program. It's a vision for sustainability, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. But I'll just tell you the key right now. If alumni are our greatest resources, you know, our really greatest gifts coming into the program are these incredible students that we're able to attract. And we want to be able to attract the best students possible across all different backgrounds, all parts of the country. And to do that, we need to be able to support them as best we can. So this is really all about generating, we have an endowment already, we're really trying to grow that endowment so we can offer robust scholarships to our students. That's what we really want to do, so that their time here, they can focus on their studies, getting to know each other, and have a way of, you know, thriving, you know, here in the Greater Burlington community at the same time. So that is our primary emphasis. That's why we're doing this. So make sure you take one of this. Look at that, Meredith right on the cover. Where's Meredith? There she is. She's hiding in the back there. But anyway, it's really emblematic of what we do, and we're grateful. Again, this is a 3-part stool. The Alumni Association, critical, the program, and we've got partners now in the UVM Foundation. Because being at the university, we couldn't run the program without being at the University of Vermont. There's no way around it. This is a university-scale program because in integrated field science, you need a plant and soil science department. You need a geology and geography department. You need to have history. You need to have, you know, wildlife professors, all sorts of things like that together. Plant biogeography is right in the center of it. That's why we're rooted in plant biology. But to be able to walk the next building away or just down the hall and be able to interact with specialists in certain areas is really an incredible key to doing it. Being at the university also has its challenges if you're a graduate student for funding. And I want to just acknowledge that a lot of the traditional funding goes for graduate students who are working, for instance, on grants from the National Science Foundation, doing big multi-year research projects. Those are critical, but for field naturalists who are doing really 1-year research projects on community-based conservation, it's a different angle, and we need to figure out ways to support these students so they can continue to do this work. Because our alumni, as Sean was saying, go on to get connected with on-the-ground conservation work. I'm looking at Haley, who's working at Vermont River Conservancy down in Brattleboro, doing great work related to flood resiliency and all sorts of things on our rivers right here. You know, we're going to introduce Kathleen later, who's been doing incredible wildlife conservation work in East Africa. You know, so students around the world doing this, how do we get them there? How do we attract them, support them, retain them, and launch them in the next phase? And the key thing is to support them. So we're really trying to grow this scholarship approach, and you'll hear more about that tonight. But I encourage you, please take one of these away. We've worked hard on this first draft of this, and we really want to have you help us figure out how to make this happen, bring it to fruition. All right, I think I'm close to wrapping up here. I'm going to introduce two folks next. First, I just want to acknowledge Ashley McLeod, who's our new Major Gift Officer with CAL's College Bag and Lifestyle. She's really been helping us to think about how we might launch this new initiative, which has been super. So thanks for being here, Ashley, and helping us out. The next person is no stranger to a lot of you. It's Willard Morgan. And I'm really pleased that Willard has stayed in touch with the program since he graduated. I want to say it was about 2002. Does that feel right? He was on the R team before we got into double letters. I was on the K team, by the way, so I was with you a few years before. And there was an O team member here, so. And a D team? E team. Alicia, of course. So anyway, and John here from the S team. So we have a lot of folks from the early years. We're all the way up to our new team is going to be the AO team. If you do the math, you can tell that's 41. I think if you go 26 plus a little bit more, we're there. But going back to Willard and the R team, I had the chance to visit Willard. Jennifer and I stopped by and saw Willard at Chewauquee. And he had a long career at Chewauquee as the president, and he was really working with an incredible conservation education organization. And we've stayed in touch since then, and I've just been thrilled that Willard has taken a real interest in helping figure out a sustainable future through this program, through all his kind of work and development in the past and his program design. And so I want to turn it over to Willard to share a few words as well. So thank you, Willard.
Great, yeah. I'll take a couple minutes because I'm eager to hear what Kathleen has to say about her work. And I was super pleased to hear Sean's rundown. And there's so much of what he said that I felt like applied to me, including that I met a lot of my wife here. So there's so many ways that the program impacted me. I didn't do some of the more typical any things with my career after a little while. And I ended my career mostly being someone who raised money and led an organization, which turns out to be useful for a lot of things. And just in brief, I'll just say Walter, when he came to see me in 2021, he's very generous to say I've stayed in touch with the program, but it was pretty tenuous for a while, meaning I had a lot to do. I was not really paying attention for a long time. And I had heard that moment when there was a bobble in the program and students weren't enrolled, and then there was this alumni association, but to be honest, it was like out there. I was raising kids, I was running an organization, I was managing crises, had a lot going on. But then Walter came by in the way that Walter does, in this really nice way. And I got to meet Jen, and we just started talking, and I realized there were things that I hadn't really been paying attention to. And as I started hearing about the story, I got more curious. And then I left my work in 22 and was ready to do something different. And what I started to do is think about ways I could, with the skill set experience I had, make an impact for things I really cared about, but in a different way than I had before. And my theory of change is that really good ideas and really good people that make a big impact sometimes need just a little bit of time, expertise, or money to make sure it keeps going. And especially things I care about, the environment, the outdoors, community, and education, often those things are under-resourced and underfunded, and sometimes run with a lot of social capital that wears down over time. So as I left my work and did my own recovering and rewiring, not retiring, I started talking to Walter more, and what I realized is there's something really unique, and this is just a shout out to Walter. Walter, I think, is a very unique person at a unique time for this program, and he has a finite window of time, because he's going to go on to other things at some point not too long from now, too. And knowing what I now know about the program having some challenges, in just the ways Walter described, because it's so impactful, so meaningful, so relevant, like it was in '83, and at a university that's becoming an R1 institution, and that needs certain funding models to run. I ran organizations that I had to fund for a long time. I understand why this could be a really hard business model unless something shifts. And to me, it's really important for the world, not just us or me, because this place has such a big impact, but it's really important for the world that this approach to graduate education continues. It has, for the 223 people that have come through it, has an unusual outsized impact and value. I can look across all similar programs. I just think this is probably the best. And I heard a story from Jeffrey Hughes last night about working with foundations in his time, and where some outside folks who looked at graduate programs like this across the country and said, this is the highest impact, highest value one. This was 10 or 20 years ago. So with that as like the reason why I'm volunteering my time, and I've been really fortunate to be part of the team to connect the Alumni Association, the UVM Foundation, thank you Ashley, and the program, and just I think what I'm adding is experience raising money, and the belief that this is worthy of raising money for. So we are meeting monthly as a steering committee, and we're just gradually starting to talk to folks and setting goals and targets, and the goal is to raise a private endowment, as Walter said, not to stand alone, because there's going to be tuition dollars, grants, and other things, but without a permanent, dedicated source of funding, my concern is that it's going to be hard to make a long-term case for this program within an R1 institution that has a lot of other priorities. So my hope is all of us, and many of us go into fields that don't pay that well, so I'm not asking you all to mortgage your house for the program, but I am asking you to think about what you can do, and to be willing to think about your own contributions in different ways than maybe you have before. And so we are going to raise endowment dollars. The program has about $650,000 of endowment right now. Some of that scholarship, some of it is for operations. It's actually a really nice start. It generates just over $25,000 a year now. Can do more in the future. So that's kudos to those who came before and who have been generous. I think short term, we'd like to raise another $500,000 for scholarship. That would be $30,000 more a year. And then sort of medium term, I think we need to hit probably $3 to $5 million of endowment dollars. And that may seem like a big dollar amount to some, but in my world, that's very doable. And so what I ask you all to do is to educate yourself about what we are doing, grab that, and think about things that that you can do. $100 a year over 5 years, that becomes $500. Multiply that by 200, you're starting to make real money, right? And if anyone is able to do more, that's great. And also, depending where you are in their lives, planned gifts make a huge difference. And I think we're a demographic where a planned gift might actually be much bigger than what we could give as we're in our careers or raising families. So. And then also think about people you know, people in your networks, in your families, or people who might have access to resources in foundations and otherwise. And I think we have a good 3 to 5 year window to make a real difference for the program. And my hope is that when my days are done, I can look back and see that the next 250 students have come out of this in the next 40 years, and they've gone on to do, think of all the stats that Sean read off, and then multiply that 2 or 3 times. So I think that's the opportunity for us ahead. And I want to thank Ashley for being a part of helping us do this. And I just want to come back to Walter and just say that I think without Walter's leadership and charisma, to use that term, and just genuine character, I don't know if you're like me, but Walter's one of my favorite people in the world. I wouldn't be doing this. So Walter, thank you for stepping in this role a few years ago, and I think you're doing amazing work.
Absolutely.
So thanks.
I'm just about to introduce our speaker for tonight. In just a minute. I did want to say that I've been, I think a lot of people know that back in 1982, Hub took his vision to the R.K. Mellon Foundation, based in Pittsburgh, and really got this foundational grant to launch the program. And it was a big experiment, but the idea, as we know, has persisted for 40 years. And as it turns out, my mom lives in Pittsburgh, and I was talking to Ashley about this, and Emily Lapat from the foundation. I'm going to be going to Pittsburgh in about a month, and my plan is to revisit R.K. Mellon Foundation, share what's happened. really over the last 4 years. And that's just one of the angles we want to make sure we're reapproaching, to share that, what their investment has been and what the return on the investment has been. And might they reinvest in our next 40 years as well? So we're looking at all different levels of engagement is our goal. And more on this as they come. As Willard said, please do grab one of our out of the press, somebody from the foundation described me as conversation starters. I like that. Anyway, give us feedback on it too. This is our first iteration of creating this, so we want to make sure they're really good conversation starters. And so I'll stop there, but I think in about 5 minutes, I'm so pleased that you're going to be able to participate in a presentation by one of our amazing alums, and that's Kathleen Fitzgerald from the O team. And the O team arrived on the scene, I remember, because Jeffrey was on sabbatical and I was stepping in only like a year after I graduated to help Shelburne take us through. And it was amazing to me with Tor Hansen, who was our speaker last year at the symposium, John Robison, Julian Meisler, and of course Kathleen Fitzgerald, the famous O team. And Kathleen's gone on to do sort of incredible work. And I'm going to introduce her more formally in a minute inside. I think Kathleen's got like a half an hour presentation for us that will round out our evening. But in the next 5 minutes, love you to get more of these fine empanadas and other things, a plate of food, a drink, because we're going to start in there in 5 minutes. Okay? All right, thanks everybody. Welcome to the main event. Again, thanks for being here. It's starting to rain outside, softly, kind of a beautiful rain on Meredith's birthday. But anyway, I love this time of year with the rain and just the various shades of green that are out there on the landscape right now. Just phenomenal. And the birds are putting on such a show for us today. I'm just so moved. And feel incredibly grateful that we're all in careers that we're just connected with more than in the world what we do. And speaking of which, I'd like to say her greatest claim to fame is being a member of the O team, but that was only a stop along the way. Amazing things happened before that. I actually think I first met Kathleen Fitzgerald. I lived in Richmond right when I moved to Vermont, and I went by the offices of Wild Earth magazine, and it was, little did I know, I was going to get to know Tom Butler, Jennifer Esser, and John Davis, a whole Davis Cell, just an incredible group of people with Wild Earth magazine, with incredible vision for conservation of more than the world. And so that's when we first met. But then Kathleen came and joined the Field Naturalist program in 1997 as a member of this O team, and has gone down in history. And has gone on since then to just do amazing work, both here in Vermont. A lot of people know about Northeast Wilderness Trust, who's really doing sort of wildlands conservation throughout the Northeast, and including here in Vermont. I think you were the co-founder and the first executive director of this really robust organization doing incredible work. Worked at Stowe Land Trust, one of our key conservation partners. And you've come back to Stowe now, I understand, which is that we're so pleased about that. Went on to work in Africa for a number of years as vice president of the African Wildlife Foundation. I think we're going to hear a lot about that tonight as a part of your presentation. And is back here in the U.S. with us now as project director at the Pew Charitable Trust for Enduring Earth. I love that title, Enduring Earth. And so this is fantastic. And I like this description. She's been leading integrated large landscape conservation, climate, and development programs for over 3 decades in 20 countries. really has had a big influence. So we're really pleased to have you right back here in Vermont this evening to be presenting global conservation, innovation in achieving durable conservation. Let's welcome Kathleen Fitzgerald.
Thanks, everyone, and congratulations on your graduation. Really exciting. And it's a pleasure to be back in Shelburne. It's lovely to meet you in person. And Sean, thanks for sharing those statistics. Just really powerful, right? And the target that Walter and everyone has set out in terms of ensuring that this program is durable is definitely doable, as you said, Walter. I think when you hear the numbers, you hear the impact, you hear the stories, I think the alumni, it's our responsibility to ensure that this program endures. So I'm excited about the campaign and looking forward to seeing where it goes. I'm also excited to see Alicia here. Alicia was one of our leaders in the Field Naturalist program for the O team and had an enormous impact on myself and my colleagues, so thank you for coming. And yeah, it's great to be here. So I want to talk a little bit about global conservation. I'm going to take us out of Shelburne and out of Vermont and out of the United States. Just give you a reflection on what's happening globally. And I think the term durable, Willard, you might have even used it when you talked about this program. So it's relevant in so many ways, but when we think about creating conservation, how do we make sure that it's durable for the long term? Now, I couldn't do a presentation without mentioning my colleagues in the O team. We're also called the O No team. And this is a recent shot. Actually, we met about 5 years ago in California. And I really loved this quote that I found on the Field Naturalist program website, right? The FN program trains people who have the moxie to break new environmental ground. And we need people breaking new ground. And the FN program is doing that. So again, amazing that we're now embarking on this journey to make sure that long term we continue to have FNs running around the world breaking new ground. And certainly the FN program, one of the key things is giving students the voice and the courage to demonstrate that moxie to do innovative things. Because I think everyone in this room knows that what we're doing right now is not working, right? You're all here because you care about nature, you care about the state of the world, and you know far too well, as this report, the IPBES report laid out, just laid bare, that we are seeing species loss like we've never seen before and at a pace that we've never seen before. So something needs to change. And again, the innovation that the Field Naturalist program trains us in really is important as we think about the next 20, 30, 40 years. So this term durable is something that I do think about often, and this is a photo that I took of an elephant, obviously, in a community conservancy that I helped create in southern Kenya. And I picked it because when I think about durable conservation, it's not just about drawing a line on a map. And in this area, for example, this land is owned by the Maasai. And so to make conservation durable in this area, it was three things. One was ecological. We mapped this area, we knew the elephants were moving from one protected area to another. So we knew ecologically it made sense. Socially, the Maasai wanted to keep that land open for for their traditional ways of life. And then economically, this is already a cash economy in this area, we structured a payment for ecosystem service. That next year was a massive drought. It wiped out 80% of all the cows in that area. They had the resiliency because they had this ecosystem service payment. So in Africa, the work that I was doing was really looking at durability, which goes well beyond lines on maps, well beyond looking at where are the important hotspots. And so, well, I'm going to disappoint Alicia. Well, I was trained as an ecologist. I spend far too much time now looking at how do we pay for this? And how do we influence government to support these things? And that's what I want to share with you today. The other thing are some of the amazing recovery stories taking place. And it's been interesting coming back to the US because the term rewild is really a hot term, at least within our community in the United States. We don't use that term in Africa. But some of the most incredible rewilding stories are taking place there. And that's what I want to share with you tonight. So when we think about what is it going to cost to shore up global biodiversity, the Nature Conservancy, the Paulson Institute, and the Atkinson Center for Sustainability looked at that. And what they found was annually, we need about $711 billion to secure biodiversity. So that makes our 3 million seem pretty good, right? So that's how much we need. And then the next question is there political will? Right? Because it's not going to happen without the political will. And 2 years ago, 192 countries came together at the Convention on Biological Diversity and agreed to protect 30% of the planet. Now that's not enough, but it is unprecedented to have 192 countries say, we need to protect 30% of the planet. So that's pretty exciting, and part of the work that I'm doing now is supporting countries, supporting indigenous leaders in getting there. Because we can't just wag our fingers at the government of Uganda and tell them we protect 30% of the planet. We need to go there and say, what do you need in order to get to your targets of protecting 30% of your country? Which brings us to Africa. So I spent 15 years living in Africa, and the thing that people don't realize is just how big it is, and diverse, and incredible. I'm very biased. And so about a third of the planet's biodiversity is found in Africa, and a quarter of the globe's mammalian species are found in Africa. The Congo Basin, which is probably right about here, second largest tropical forest in the world, absolutely critical from a climate standpoint. And a majority of the population rely on natural resources to survive. And the numbers that the government pays attention to are, for example, that bottom number, about 8.5% of the GDP for the continent, which is quite significant, comes from tourism, and that tourism is wholly dependent on those elephants, for example, that I showed you. That's why people come to Africa. And those are the numbers that the governments are paying attention to in terms of the people as well as the funding. So to secure that, the biodiversity, there's an unbelievable network of conservation areas across the continent. We have about 8,500 protected areas, about 14% of the continent, which is amazing. And over the last 4 decades, we've seen a significant increase in protected areas. The challenge is we haven't seen a corollary increase in budget. So you have these conservation areas, but they're not functioning because there are not resources to protect them, sustain them, and fulfill their ecological targets. So So I'm going to bring it down even one more level and give you an example of the lion. So since I graduated from the FN program, we've seen a decline in about 50% of the lion population, just crashing. This map here shows you the historical range of lion compared to the current range in that peach area. I could really depress you and show you slide after slide of all species. I'm not going to do that, don't worry. But this is what we're seeing across the continent in terms of the decline in species. And so we were curious, how much would it cost to actually protect the protected areas that currently support lions? Like, what are we talking about? So we looked at 250 parks across Africa that support lions, so looking at lying as a proxy of ecological health. What we found was more than $1 billion is needed annually to ensure that the protected areas that currently support lion are actually well managed. So again, that makes our target here seem pretty doable. And what we found is about 88 to 94% of the protected areas are not functioning. So that map that shows the 8,500 protected areas, a lot of those are not functioning. And not a surprise, that results in conservation land failing to achieve conservation objectives. So there's a problem with resources. The good news is we have amazing examples of where if you provide adequate funding, if that money goes to the right place, and if you have capacity, then numbers start going up. And so that's the story I want to share with you tonight. Because across Africa, there is conservation innovation taking place at a scale and a pace that is super exciting. So this is a long list of some of the financial mechanisms that are being used across the continent. From nature-based tourism to debt conversion to payment for ecosystem services across the continent, we're seeing all of these mechanisms being used, and what is happening is that funding is being plowed into those conservation areas, and we're seeing recovery like we've never seen before, which is really exciting. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. So the first is this mechanism called collaborative management partnerships, and this is a toolkit that I developed for the World Bank to essentially guide governments who are interested in entering into partnerships for conservation management. So a collaborative management partnership is basically when a protected area authority, that could be a government, a community, or a private landowner, where they enter into an arrangement with a partner, it could be a nonprofit, it could be a private sector partner, for the management of a protected area. So basically you devolve certain management responsibilities to a partner. It's a public-private partnership. And about 14% of the protected areas in Africa are now being managed through these partnerships. Now the partnerships originally started in Central Africa because of the poaching crisis. So in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there was a massive poaching crisis in the 90s, and the government of Congo said, we don't have the money, we don't have the capacity, we need help. So that's how it started. And over the last 2 decades, we've seen governments across the continent entering into these partnerships. And what we have found is that by entering into those partnerships, the park budgets, the conservation area budgets have increased anywhere from 1.5 to 14.6 times more. And I'm going to show you how that now correlates into this rebound of species, which is incredible. So one example is Gorongosa National Park in Mozambique, and I picked this example because it is the only protected area in the world, if someone knows different, let me know, where you can get a conservation biology master's inside the park. You don't leave the park. Sound kind of familiar? Anyway, so they entered into a management agreement with with the government of Mozambique. This is the Greg Carr Foundation, based in Massachusetts. And they renegotiated recently, so they have a 25-year agreement for Gorongosa. What has happened, so Mozambique was just riddled with conflict, civil war. There was nothing left in the park. People destitute, wildlife gone, nothing. And since then, the recovery of wildlife has just been extraordinary. So you can see 2020 numbers compared to 2000, gone from 200 elephants to 718, 20 wildebeest up to 815. I mean, unbelievable recovery. They reintroduced wild dogs most recently. In 2018, the population is now at 74. At the same time, the recovery of communities that live in and around this ecosystem has also been amazing and is part of the ethos of the Gorongosa project. So for example, 200,000 people have benefited, 52% of those female. Greg Carr is very clear in terms of focus on girls and empowering girls. And that is very much a part of the ecological recovery, which is really exciting. Their elephant researcher is this extraordinary woman who is just dynamic and doing incredible things. Education programs, health programs. The other amazing thing is they did a film which was done by some colleagues from Nat Geo, National Geographic. And the story of our Gorongosa, not only has it told the story of this park and the people, but it's also changed the branding of Mozambique. Because Mozambique is known for its civil war, it's known for corruption, it's known for timber theft. But this story has just changed the brand. So when you're talking to the president of Mozambique about conservation, it's not just about these damn lions that come and, you know, kill the cattle. It's about their image, and it's about empowerment of communities and this incredible recovery story, which is really exciting. I want to take you now just to Rwanda, which when we think about recovery, right, I think everyone knows the story of Rwanda with the genocide. Another country riddled with conflict, riddled with just challenges. The wildlife recovery, the social recovery, the economic recovery is unbelievable. So another example, this is a park, Akagera National Park, which is a sweet little park on the eastern boundary of Rwanda, 20-year agreement with the government of Rwanda. And again, you can see the numbers there. They had a census in 2013 and go to 2021 from 7,000 to 11,000 species. They've reintroduced successfully lion and rhino, and it's an unbelievable recovery story of wildlife. Yes?
No, I'm just wondering, what do they see the census up there?
Those are the, sorry, great question. That's species in the park, numbers of animals. Thank you. Yes. Alongside that, again, because of the wildlife recovery, tourism has now rebounded. So, I mean, the president of Rwanda, who has dedicated significant resources to conservation, is doing it for these reasons, right? You're seeing salaries of local people going up. You're seeing tax revenue to the government going up. You're seeing visitor numbers and financial sustainability going up. In addition, Rwanda has the largest revenue share of any country in Africa. What that means is 15% of all money linked to protected areas in Rwanda goes to local communities. 15% of everything, so that's entry fees into the park. You pay $1,500 to see a mountain gorilla. Communities get 15% of that. So as Akagera increased tourism numbers, that revenue also increases. So when you visit these parks, the communities are the ambassadors because they're benefiting. I'm going to stay in Rwanda. They're also doing a wetland recovery and a wetland restoration project. Kigali is one of the most dense cities in Africa. That's the capital of Rwanda. And Rwanda is known as the land of thousand hills because it has a lot of hills. What that's meant for Kigali is there's been a lot of flooding in the city. And so they've designed a wetland restoration project and have this area, for example, is 121 hectares. It's now a park in the heart of the city. It used to be the industrial zone. They moved the entire industrial zone out of the wetland, and they did a restoration here. And now it's so cool. You go there on a Saturday or a Sunday, and families are out on the trails. They're birding. They're learning about nature. It's really exciting. So I can't talk about Rwanda without mentioning the mountain gorilla recovery, which, in my opinion, is one of the most extraordinary recovery stories. During the genocide, the numbers were down to below 200, and they're now the only great ape increasing in number. So there's about 1,200 mountain gorilla. And to the extent that now they are doing so well, habitat's becoming an issue. So they need to expand some of their protected areas, and they're looking at how best to do that. Part of that recovery story, again, comes to effectively engaging communities and effectively engaging them in conservation. So this is a lodge. You can see the park boundary here. You literally have people right up to the edge. This land is owned by a community called the Sokola community. And so we developed this lodge with them. We brought grant finance and some loan finance. The lodge is owned by the community itself, which is really important because it's their lodge, it's their land. We brought in a private sector partner to manage that lodge, and they are benefiting every year financially from this lodge. All of our contracts require that 90% of all employees are from the local community. When COVID hit and tourism wiped out all sorts of revenue, this community was one of the most resilient within that region because they had funding that they had saved from enterprises like this. They are now the ambassadors arguing with the government of Rwanda to maintain the park, to maintain conservation, because they are genuinely benefiting. And the last thing on that is, because of this recovery, the brand of Rwanda, it encircles mountain gorillas. So this is an annual event that takes place every year at the foot of, that's the volcanoes where the mountain gorillas live. And it's called Kutaizina, which means naming. And so if last year 19 baby gorillas were born, they invite celebrities, so Idris Elba, Gracia Michel, the head of the European Union, to come join the president and name those baby gorillas. It's an unbelievable branding event. Yeah, wow. It's very strategic from a funding standpoint. I mean, they invite businesses who are supporting Rwanda. But what other country do we know of that celebrates their wildlife and their heritage like this? It's such an incredible story. So I'm going to wrap up with ending with what I'm doing now, and there's no doubt that there's incredible innovation taking place in Africa and globally, but the question is time, right? We all feel this pressure of time. We need to do these things by 2030. We need to scale these things. We need to replicate these things. And so Walter mentioned the initiative I'm working with now, and it's called Enduring Earth. And the idea is, Enduring Earth it's an alliance of partners. The CEO of the Nature Conservancy calls it a radical partnership because, let's be honest, these organizations haven't really partnered to the extent we are now. So 4 organizations banding together in an entity called Enduring Earth, and we're working on global conservation deals that are called Project Finance for Permanence, which is a terribly wonky term, I know. And basically what a Project Finance for Permanence, PFP, we're conservationists, so we need to, use an acronym, because that's what we do. But basically a PFP, it enables us to think long-term, think about what do we need for durable conservation, and brings all the stakeholders together around a project, a unified vision with a single close. And that's key. So essentially what it is rather than going to Rwanda and saying, we're going to do this project in Nakagera, and then we're going to do this project in Volcanoes National Park, and then this project in Nungwe, it's saying, what does the country need in order to meet its 30 by 30 strategy? What do we need financially to ensure that there's sustainable finance long term? Who are the key people that need to be part of this? And then we do a 10 to 20-year conservation plan for a country or a region. I'm working with some of the indigenous leaders in Canada that manage large territories, so it's not the whole country, but it's their territory. What do you need to achieve your conservation objectives, 10, 20 years? How much money do you need? Robust financial model. And then as they spend that money, so that goes like this, we develop sustainable finance mechanisms so that by the time that they've set up their conservation infrastructure, which includes community governance, conservation, that durable finance mechanism is set up. There have been 7 deals that have been done to date around the world. Our target is to do 20 of these by 2030. And the value of partnering is that we're approaching donors together. We are sharing lessons learned. We're collaborating on technical aspects. And thus far, we're 3 years into the partnerships, that's proving true. We have about 10 deals right now in planning. And when you think 7 have been done to date over the last 2 decades, it's pretty extraordinary in terms of the pipeline. So that's what we're trying to do to ensure long-term durability. And with that, I will wrap up and say thank you for listening.
Speak to some of the politics. Like you started with a Maasai example, and I'm aware that relations between the government and the Maasai have changed really dramatically in some places recently. People have moved from lands, and I can imagine that's probably upended some of the original deals and from a while ago. So, I mean, I know you can't control a nation. However, how do you figure in that risk in these deals, political change?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting. For Enduring Earth, one of the things that we screen is political risk, because those deals will not be done in a country that can't honor commitments, which means it's not going to work in certain countries.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I was going to say Democratic Republic of Congo. We're not going to do a Project Finance for Permanence deal there, despite the fact that it's unbelievably important ecologically. That tool is just not the right tool there. In terms of the Maasai, happy to talk about that. I mean, in Kenya, the deal that I mentioned and started with, they have land rights. So what's amazing, what happened in Kenya is the Maasai traditionally managed land collectively. But because of a couple of factors, one, the government policies made them stay in one place, so they couldn't do their traditional moving around. was a challenge. And number two, they were concerned that the government of Kenya would take their land at some point. So they subdivided their land, which from an ecological standpoint is a disaster. So in Amboseli National Park, which is now the longest elephant study in the world, the Maasai subdivided all their property, 60-acre lots, which was just a nightmare. You could understand though why they would do that. They wanted rights, they wanted that title. And so that conservancy that I mentioned, we cobbled together 60 landowners who agreed to create a communal conservancy. So what's fascinating is they went from communal ownership, they subdivided, and then they came together. So that area in particular, 320 Maasai came together to protect that corridor, but they did so with that piece of paper. So the payment for ecosystem service that they got, it didn't go to a committee, it went directly into their bank accounts. Because some of those committees, you know, you can see the chair driving a really nice vehicle and you're like, how are those benefits being distributed? The issue of the Maasai you're talking about is probably northern Tanzania, in Ngorongoro Crater. Yeah. And that Tanzania is quite different, as you know, in terms of how they engage with the Maasai and other indigenous groups there. And the Ngorongoro Crater Conservation Area is a unique setup. It's not a park, it's not a reserve, it's its own conservation structure, which allowed for the Maasai to be there. What's happened is the hunting areas around that, the Tanzanian government has given to the Saudis and other governments from the Middle East, which has created a lot of friction. And at the same time, you've had a lot of Maasai moving into Ngorongoro Crater because of the benefits. So these things are really complicated, right? As we, for example, were doing this payment for ecosystem service to the Maasai, the question is, well, how are they using that money? And is it actually going to be good long-term for conservation? These are really complicated. So what's happening in Ngorongoro is more people have come in, and that's put pressure. So the government's struggling with what to do, and they don't handle it well. Yeah.
So would that country fail the risk screen at this point? Or no?
Tanzania, we're not doing anything there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, along those lines, clearly you're trying to bring a bunch of different partners, funders, or whatever together. How do you get the scale right for them? Or how do you get them to agree on a common scale for a project?
From the funding side,
Well,
or?
sort of to the funding, or the, you know, the country that you might choose to work with and that sort of thing.
It's huge, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of balancing there.
So, a lot of it comes down to that single close, which is incredibly powerful. So one of the recent deals that was done was in Colombia. So Colombia has been talking about doing 30 by 30, setting aside 30% terrestrial and marine. But they don't have the resources to actually do that. So part of it is getting them to make commitments, and getting them to the table is through the resources that we're able to leverage through this partnership. But the other key part is once that funding is raised, it goes into a fund. It's an independent fund that is not managed by the government. So that's something else they have to agree to, which some countries may be like, right? So Brazil, for example, the Amazon was one of the early project finance for permanence deals. And that fund for the Amazon rainforest was managed by an independent board of directors. So when Bolsonaro was in power and tried to, literally strip away conservation restrictions, he didn't have access to that fund. And the studies that have been done since then have demonstrated that the projects benefiting from that independent fund, not surprisingly, deforestation, the level was maintained, whereas the other areas were just leveled during his leadership. So that independence is absolutely key, and for some governments, it's a tough pill to swallow, but that's non-negotiable. And the funding is released based on that conservation plan and based on disbursement mechanisms. That's why you need that independent board to say, okay, so you did achieve this, this, and this. Next tranche of funding will be released. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you've seen the pressures or threats to conservation that change over time, like maybe from poaching to mining or population growth, or what are some of the biggest threats in Africa now, and how have you seen that change?
Yeah, so everyone talks about poaching, right? And it is a real threat. I mean, 7 years ago, we were losing about 1,200 rhino a year to this insatiable demand from Asia for rhino horn, right? Your fingernail, which is what it is. So certainly poaching does have a major impact on particular species, elephants and rhinos in particular. Lions as well, for the bones, which are seen as medicinal in certain countries. The biggest threat in my mind is habitat, right? Because development is going at a pace unprecedented. There's not great planning in most of the countries, or there are great plans, but so Kenya, for example, had really good plans, but the agencies that were responsible for upholding those plans didn't have the capacity to actually do so. Like, we would have to pick someone up in a vehicle and drive them to an illegal mining site in order to get them to do their job. They just didn't have the vehicles, they didn't have the staff. So it's that balance of capacity versus really good planning. And then certainly external factors like China. Development is taking place. I mean, China has a major presence all over the continent. And then these precious minerals, which are becoming really important, they are really important for electric vehicles. Where do we get those? Right? So Guinea, for example, is one of the most valuable countries in terms of those resources. And yet it's also one of the most important for Western chimpanzees. So that balance is big. Yeah. And instability. You know, 10 years ago we were talking about Africa rising. The cover of The Economist was about Africa rising. But if you look around the map, there's a lot of conflict right now. And it's, you know, when you have conflict and chaos, it's not good for conservation. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just wondering about what the funding package looks like for one of these big projects, and where those large amounts of money is coming from. You said that a combination of charitable grants and also like bank financing. Is that right? And is it coming directly from those 4 organizations, the World Wildlife Conservancy, Pew, and the fourth? And yeah, just how do you put together that much money from that many different players, and what does that portfolio kind of look like at big scale?
Yeah, so for each of the deals, again, what donors are appreciating is there is this genuine partnership, that these organizations have said, we have until 2030 to do a lot of work, and we are going to collaborate to do that. And donors are grateful for that, right? It makes their life easier, and they see that there's greater impact. In terms of the package, so public and private funding, so foundations, for example. The Gordon and Betty Moore is one example of an amazing partner that we've been working with. Public funders, so European Union, USAID, the French, all of those public institutions, and then the government. So there's that leverage of we can bring in public and private funding, but you need to be at the table. So the ratio depends. We're working right now on 4 Indigenous-led project finance for permanence deals in Canada. Unbelievable what these Indigenous leaders are trying to do. Because of reconciliation in Canada, they now have rights over their resources and their lands. And they want to set aside large areas to maintain their home areas. So with those 4, we went to Prime Minister right before that Convention on Biological Diversity event in Montreal, and we said there are 4 large-scale conservation initiatives being led by Indigenous leaders across your country. You, Prime Minister, have committed to 30 by 30. You've committed to reconciliation. Here's how you can do it. And he announced $800 million to finance those projects. So by delivering large scale, by delivering clear strategies, and then saying we can match that at a ratio, in that case it was a 4-to-1 ratio, that's what got him to make that announcement. But other countries like in, I don't know, let's say we're going to do that in Zimbabwe, there's no way the government could do 4-to-1. It would probably be 1-to-4. So it just depends on the local situation. Yeah.
Just kind of related to the 3 orgs. Is the 4th org based in North America too?
So Zoma Lab is an organization that is the family office of Ben and Lucia Walton.
Oh, okay.
And they're based in Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I don't have a fully formed question, but so those are 4 North American organizations, and you're working in nations around the world. So, but you, within those orgs, you seem to have strong relationships in all those nations. But how do you sort of navigate the sort of imperialism question here?
It's a really good question. So one of the, someone asked about political, can you do it everywhere? No. The other question is there implementation capacity in the country? So the 4 projects, for example, in Canada, we are providing funding to in-country, in-region institutions, and in the 3 that Pew is supporting directly, that's the Indigenous leaders. Those are fully Indigenous-led, which means in those cases, they are the ones doing their conservation plan. They are the ones doing their financial model. There's one case where they didn't have capacity and they asked for our help in developing a financial model, which means our finance guru is basically sitting and saying, what do you need and how much does it cost? I mean, obviously it has to make sense, right? So one of the things I like about the way Pew works is we're funding in-country organizations and institutions. TNC and WWF, they have country offices, so they're doing it through their country offices, which are staffed by nationals. But it's a great question, and we've had some really amazing conversations, in particular with these Canada projects, on what does Indigenous-led projects mean, and they're really pushing the envelope, which is amazing. Like they're telling us you need to be bolder, which I just think is great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
This isn't really a question, but it's a comment, Kathleen, and just in the context of talking to alums from the Field Naturalist program, you're just an amazing example of someone who took the training and put it to incredible work. It's just really, I'm really happy to see what you've been up to and are still doing. So thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you. It's great. Yeah.
What place are we looking at in the beautiful photo?
That's actually southern Tanzania.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it was fun picking some photos.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. I'm wondering, when you are targeting new projects, are you thinking about sort of biodiversity hotspots and where we can have most impact? Or is there also sort of opportunistic calculation here? Like, here's an opportunity, maybe it's not a biodiversity hotspot per se, but we have a good opportunity to work with somebody who's going to help us create a sustainable model. Could you speak a little bit about that sort of trade-off?
It's a good question. So my first job when I was working at the African Wildlife Foundation was basically taking FN principles and applying it, because it was figuring out, I mean, Africa's huge, where should AWF work, right? Which was a really fun job. And what we did there was, so we started with the ecological aspects. So we did the layering. AWF was focused on about 6 species. So we did a lot of species modeling, figuring out their home ranges, etc. Layered on top of that, ecosystem services. Layer on top of that, climate implications, so as things shift. And so we did that whole ecological thing. And then we said, where can we add value, right? So we did a gap analysis of which organizations were working where. So Gabon, for example, unbelievably important country ecologically. But there are so many amazing organizations that are working in Gabon that it didn't appear on our priority map. And I would always have to qualify that, like, you know, we're not saying it's not important, but we're saying we can't really add value. With the Project Finance for Permanence, the 10 projects that I mentioned that are in our pipeline, those are mainly opportunistic. Meaning, ecologically, we knew they were significant. Politically, we think we can get a deal done. Financially, we think we can raise the resources, and there are good organizations on the ground. Now we're starting to think about, in the next phase, do we need to be more strategic and proactive? It's kind of hard, because to use this tool, you do need to have those criteria. Like I mentioned, the Congo Basin. You know, it would be amazing to do 5 countries that make up the Congo Basin, but probably 3 out of the 5 just don't have the ability to meet that obligation. So we're looking at that right now. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
How would you approach doing something in a place that doesn't have a political capacity?
Say it again.
How would you approach conservation in the Congo Basin then?
Yeah, it's a magic question, right? I mean, so Gabon they did a debt conversion recently, meaning they basically traded in some of their debt and leveraged some finance for their forests. They've also recently had a transition in power, as they like to call it, i.e. a coup. So how things are going to shake out there, we're all still watching, but the new government has said they're going to honor the commitments. They've incredibly important forest. I don't know, for Congo, Brazzaville, and for Democratic Republic of Congo, what's the right mechanism? Not sure. Democratic Republic of Congo recently passed legislation that enables communities to create their own forest areas, and that seems to be working, which is amazing. But you've got some pretty powerful factors in terms of some of these foreign timber companies in there, so it's hard. I don't know the answer. But there's a lot of support, and there's a lot of good work, and there's acknowledgement on how important that is from a climate standpoint. Yeah.
Great questions. And our great presentation, really inspiring examples. You know, I can tell you that bringing human well-being and ecological well-being together in these projects is just so important and powerful. It seems like it's working, and long may that continue.
Yes. Yeah.
And anyway, we're gonna wind up here because it is 6:30. Thank you so much for
Wow, thank
great
you.
presentation.